Welcome to the Fantasy Aceball podcast. This is your host, Tim Kanak. You can find me on X at Fantasy Aceball, and you can find me also on the YouTube at the Tim Kanak if you want to watch live. If you are watching on YouTube live, you'll see that we have a guest today, and it's not Raymond. And I'll tell you why. I'm gonna read what Raymond texted me about hopping onto this podcast because it's pretty funny. Um, but we have with us today Jake Holland, who is basically the second co-host. I think you have the second most appearances on this podcast to Raymond. So I think you're ahead of Gabe now. At this point, I think you've beaten Gabe as being host number 2 on the Fantasy Aceball podcast. So Jake, you can find him on X at JakeBaseball17. What's going on, Jake?
Hey, what's going on, Tim? Glad to be back. It's been a while. We just talked about that. If you hear some rain, we're about to go through a thunderstorm down here in Houston, so hey, ignore that. Let me know if I'm clipping too much, but it's good to be back talking some pitchers.
I think you'll be good. During one of my Prospect One podcasts with the Welsh last year, we were podcasting during a hurricane. There was a hurricane hitting me, and he's like, "I think I hear lightning." And I'm like, "Yeah, well, there's a hurricane, so we'll be lucky if the roof stays on or whatever. If we'll be lucky if nothing blows into my window live on the podcast here. But I think we can handle a little rain." So
100%.
So basically, Raymond, he tells me, he's like, "I would love to do a podcast, but I don't want to talk about pitchers." This is literally what he said, because he says, "You could say this live. Pitchers suck. They're unpredictable, and injuries wipe you out for long periods of time. Take 10 hitters first, then figure it out." Boom. That's my analysis. Not doing any podcast on pitchers. so that's verbatim Raymond's commentary on pitchers, is that I guess he's going to just follow the crowd this year and hope that his guys don't get hurt. And I think that he's a little hurt because we have a league that we're in together that's a 20-team league, and pitching is just so valuable in that league that you're lucky if you have 5 starters because it's 20 teams.
Oh, right.
So you just have to think okay, if I have 5 decent starters that are regularly pitching, I'm pretty good. And he kept, because you get 7 keepers in this league, and he kept all pitchers so that he wouldn't have to waste all his high draft picks on pitchers. And then I think 3 or 4 of them all got hurt in the keeper league. So it's his whole strategy in this league last year was all dependent on him keeping these young pitchers like Grayson Rodriguez and stuff, and they were going to stay healthy. I think he had Grayson, he had a bunch of guys. I can't remember who all he had, but they all basically got hurt. I don't know, maybe one was healthy, but they basically all got hurt, and it just completely tanked him because he drafted all hitters because he kept all the pitchers and they all got hurt. He's like, "Oh, that was a waste of time." So
I get what he's saying. I totally get what he's saying. Pitchers are one of the most unpredictable, highest injury rate that we've seen, especially last year. It did feel like everyone was just going down. If you had a guy that was throwing consistent innings, you were good. But I get it, Raymond. He's just going to be the guy that's drafted in the top of the queue guys when the draft comes, round 8 or so.
Yeah, exactly. So talking about pitcher injuries, something I did this year, which you might like in my spreadsheet here, Jake, is you can note that I put ages in first and foremost into all my pitcher and hitters for this year on fScores. I had never done that before, I guess I was kind of always like, oh, if someone wants to look at the age, they can just look at Fangraphs, or it's pretty easy to access information. But I think it just makes it easier and cleaner to put in the spreadsheet the age at the same time. So if you're playing a dynasty or keeper type league, that can kind of help you make decisions quicker. If you're using my spreadsheets, or if you're on Fantasy Pros looking at everything, it makes it a lot easier to just kind of, if you're trying to analyze, would I rather take this guy or this guy? And sometimes that might be based on the age. You might say, okay, do I want to pick Dylan Cease or Chris Sale this year? And you see Dylan Cease is 7 years younger, you might lean Cease for that reason. The other things that I added are the beta factor, which I've talked about in the other podcasts. I have less beta data with pitchers than I do for hitters. And the reason being is that to get my beta number, I need 3 years of consistent health. I need 3 years of a pitcher hitting the minimum qualified innings threshold to qualify, for awards or whatever for that year. And so obviously like a guy like Tarek Skubal, who's always hurt except for last year, he doesn't have the data to qualify for a beta. So the betas, you'll notice that there's a lot of pitchers that don't have one compared to the hitters. And it's just because pitchers are generally less healthy than hitters. And on that note of health, I have in here a column for the last Tommy John. So that, and I think this is going to be really helpful to people to know, okay, when is the last time this guy has had Tommy John, or have they had Tommy John before? I did a lot of research on Tommy John. Tommy John is actually in the equation. Like, I should have probably done this for shoulder surgeries too, but shoulder surgeries are a lot more unpredictable than Tommy John. Because like guys who get Tommy John now, the success rate is really high on TJ. So they generally bounce back, and you expect that like 2 years after Tommy John, that guy's going to be like right back to where they were before the injury, or like maybe even like better. But for like shoulder surgeries, it's so unpredictable that a guy who has a shoulder surgery could just be done forever. Like you never know if they're going to get back to that same level that they were at before with a shoulder injury. So that's kind of like why I didn't want to use shoulders. Other things for Tommy John. If you have Tommy John once, the odds of you having to get a second Tommy John are like 50% higher. So like 35% of all MLB pitchers get Tommy John at some point in their career. And that's not just starters, but all pitchers. And a lot of those people too, you have to figure 35% of pitchers in their career. A lot of those pitchers, they might be on the way out of their career, and then they learn that that's a Tommy John, and they just retire. So like they wouldn't even count then, because if they're just kind of like a quadruple A guy, and then you have to get Tommy John, are they really going to go through the surgery and the rehab and stuff like that? They might just call it a day. So you have to take that into consideration too. But guys who are coming off their Tommy John, there's kind of like a 5-year clean window. Like you'll see, like you're going to run into a guy like Cole Reagans who had like a failed operation. But generally, if someone gets Tommy John, you have like another 5 years between the Tommy John they just got, between like that and the next time that they're going to possibly need it again. You kind of have like a little 5-year window. The odds that someone is going to need Tommy John twice within a 5-year period is very, very low. Like it has happened for a few guys that we'll talk about in the rankings, but it's very low. So I think this little Tommy John thing here is a nice guide. And like, I don't want to tell people, hey, draft everybody who just came off TJ, because the odds that they're going to get hurt are low, is lower than anybody else. But that's kind of the truth. Like the odds are actually stacked in the favor of like drafting a guy like Shane McClanahan this year, who, threw a little bit and or like DeGrom even, like guys like that. Even though you look at their durability, they're going to be hit in their durability because they're probably not going to pitch 200 innings coming fresh off TJ. But the odds that they get hurt again and need another TJ are a lot lower than someone like Blake Snell, who's 32 years old and who's never had Tommy John at the age of 32. So I think that's just something to keep in mind as you're going through this. And I think that's a nice little thing that'll help people when you're drafting. Like you don't want to draft too many guys that are going to have a high injury risk. And I think like that will help you. Like you don't want to draft like 5 guys who all had Tommy John in 2020, all in the same year. It's like try to separate out like what stage of or like how far away someone is from Tommy John, just so that you're not running into a Raymond situation where all your guys get hurt at the same time.
No, exactly.
So you can see in the rankings, the first tier is 3 deep. And I talked to Raymond about this last time, but I almost had one giant pitcher tier between Paul Skeens and Spencer Strider. And the reason being is I was like, there's a chance that Spencer Strider, when he returns from his injury, is going to be the number 1 pitcher in baseball. There's a chance that a guy like Shane McClanahan is going to be a number 1 tier pitcher. And there's a chance that like Jacob deGrom is going to be the best pitcher in baseball too.
Yeah.
So these guys have the ability, I think, to jump up 2 tiers to this first tier here. And usually when I tier people out, the way that I tier it is I'll think of, okay, any person in this tier is pretty predictable that they can jump up 1 tier or down 1 tier. Like there's a nice predictability and like range of outcomes that they could go up or down 1 tier. And that's the way I think about it with hitters. But pitchers, the range of outcomes is a lot higher and they're a lot more volatile than hitters. So really with pitchers, the way that I tier these out, I'm thinking more of a 2 tier. Like if all goes perfectly for this pitcher, then they can jump 2 tiers up. Or if everything goes to hell for this pitcher, everything could jump 2 tiers down. But then I think it's more predictable that like there's probably like a 75% chance that they would go only 1 or 2 tier, like 1 tier up or 1 tier down. But there is that chance with pitchers, just because they're a lot more volatile and the range of outcomes is higher, that they could jump multiple tiers. And you'll also see that in the fScores versus the future fScores, that with pitchers, the range of outcomes in the fScores is a lot more wide than with the hitters. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, 100%.
So what do you think about this first tier here? I've got Paul Skeens number 1, Logan Gilbert number 2, and Tariq Skubal number 3.
I'm honestly surprised that Skubal, with everything, doesn't rank above Gilbert. I know Gilbert's been great. We have a little bit more data on him, like you said. But yeah, just coming off the year that Skubal had, it's hard to not see him being, right behind or even the number 1 ahead of Skeens.
Yeah. So, and a part of this is like trying to, if you're drafting a pitcher that high, you almost want to get a guy that you can bank. You know what I mean? Like I've been there. Like last year, I drafted Shane Bieber a lot, and then that toasted me. You know what I mean? I drafted Grayson Rodriguez a lot last year. That hurt me. Logan Gilbert is the most consistent pitcher. Like this guy every year is pitching 180, 190, 200 innings. And you can see it in his beta. 222 is an insane beta. That shows that he's basically doing the same thing year in and year out. And you can see with the durability, the 115 durability score there. This is why I put him number 2. And like, I'm going to explain this in my Fantasy Pros article. But I think that I would bank his innings if I had to pick one of these 3 guys ahead of Skubal if I'm in like a 15-team league. Mm-hmm. If I'm in a 12-team league, I am probably going to take Skubal because there's going to be a lot more waiver wire options out there in the event of injury. But if I'm in a 15-team league, I think I'm going Gilbert just for the certainty of this guy's probably not going to get hurt. He's probably going to give you 200 innings. He's going to get a bunch of wins. You just can't really go wrong with Logan Gilbert, I feel like. And he still has upside. Like he still has room for his stuff to get better. And then like Paul Skeens, I have to put number 1 just because his upside is so ridiculously high. Like what we saw from him last year, if he's going to do that next year over like 180 innings, like, come on. Like you can't.
He's 100% the number 1 pitcher. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So like, to me, Skubal on a printing basis is probably going to be better than Gilbert. But like, if I'm in a deeper league, I'm probably going to go Gilbert. And if I'm in a more shallow league, I think I'm going to lean Skubal. So that's why that's why I like tiers, because it's like, okay, to kind of, depending on your league type, it's like you can't go wrong with either of them. But like I'm just putting Gilbert ahead because I feel if I want to go for safety with a starter, that's like the guy that I want to target.
It surprised me too, looking at it. I think I'm jumping the gun going in the next tier. But a guy like Wheeler, why he might not be in that tier, just with his, he's pretty durable. He's a consistent guy. He ranks pretty high in your beta above Logan Gilbert. I'm just wondering kind of why you don't have him maybe like at the door of that first tier.
Yeah. So talking about Wheeler, he's 35. So he and Chris Sale here are kind of like on this precipice of like, when are they going to start getting worse? Right. Mm-hmm. Generally with starting pitchers, they'll last longer. Like you don't see a major decline in starters usually until like 37 or 38 years old, unless there's some sort of injury issue that could be happening. I think that I like Sale more than Wheeler in this instance here. Even though Sale, I don't think is going to repeat his amazing season he had last year. Like he was so good. I don't think there's any, like even the underlying metrics don't support how good his season was. They support that he's going to be a top 10 pitcher, but they don't support that he's going to be as good as he was, because like, I'll pull him up real quick on Fangraphs on the side here, but I think that his Sierra was like a whole run difference between his actual ERA. Like, okay, yeah, here it is. So his ERA last year was 238, but his xFIP and Sierra ranged from 264 to 280. So it's like half of a run difference. So he was a little bit lucky. And then this is the other thing with Sale too. Last year, he had a 0.46 home run per 9. His career average is 0.93. So Is Atlanta going to play better than Boston and Chicago for home runs? Yeah. So that's going to help him a little bit. He's also not in the AL East anymore, which obviously is going to increase your home run rate. Like when he was in Boston, his home run rate was over 1 every year, pretty much. When he was in Chicago, it was under 1 every year. So I think maybe there's a little bit that, okay, we can expect a career downtrend a little, but is it going to be 0.46 again when his career average is like 0.9, whatever? No, probably not. It'll probably be somewhere in that middle ground, right? Of where his home run per 9 will go up. So especially if you're in like an odd new league where you get fried by homers, that's something to take into account. And that's something that is going to be a lot of luck. Like, are you giving up solo shots when you're giving up homers, or are they 3-run bombs? So I mean, like, if you give up a 2 or 3-run bomb every other game, like that can kill you. So it just kind of depends on, like, I think he will regress closer to the mean of like between his under the hood metrics versus like the numbers that he put up last year. So I like him, but the main reason I have him ahead of Wheeler here is this Tommy John category here. Like we have older guys here. Zach Wheeler, it's been a hot minute since his TJ, 2015. We're almost 10 years separated from his TJ. Now there's not a guarantee he's going to need another one, but the further away we get from that first Tommy John, the odds of him needing another one or getting hurt is getting higher and higher. Whereas Chris Sale, his TJ was in 2020. He came back in like the end of 2022. I think that we're so close from his Tommy John, like it's only a couple years away, that I feel like there's a larger window between him possibly getting hurt again. And so like that's really the key thing between me rating Sale ahead of Wheeler, because I think that they have similar outcomes, and you kind of see that in the stuff, the control. It's more just I think that the odds of Sale getting hurt again are less than Wheeler, even though Sale has the more extensive injury history, right? But a lot of his stuff is weird, like a bike accident and like I think he had a car accident too, just like some weird off-field stuff. So like it doesn't really have anything to do with arm health.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah.
The other guy in the second tier here who's interesting. So if you're, I'll just go through the tier real quick in case you're listening and not following along on YouTube. But this tier is Blake Snell, number 4, George Kirby 5, C6, Chris Sale 7, Wheeler 8, Michael King 9, Corbin Burns 10, Yamamoto 11, Cole Reagans 12, Bryce Miller 13, and Garrett Crochet is 14. You might think like, wow, you're really in on Snell, right? Like number 4. I feel like I might be the highest person that I've seen on Snell. He has never had TJ. So he might just be one of these guys because he kind of has a different type of delivery that never needs it for whatever reason. Like he's almost like, I mean, like, I guess there was a point when Sale did have to get it, right? He got it in 2020. But there's so many years where everyone's like, oh, Sale's going to have to get TJ, like his arm action, whatever. He never needed it until later in the career. Maybe Snell, because he's getting later in the career and he's never had it, is just one of these guys who's never going to need to get TJ. Just maybe the way he pitches. So I'm kind of leaning that he might be one of those type of pitchers, and him going to the Dodgers is only going to be better for him. Right? Like San Francisco is a great place to pitch. It's a better stadium to pitch than LA. So maybe we see more home runs given up by Snell, but Snell is really good. And Nick Pollock of Pitcher List has talked about this a lot, is that like Snell has the best mistake rate, he calls it, out of like all pitchers, which means that like he is the best at not giving up bad mistakes. And a part of that is like he'll pitch outside the zone a lot, which is why he gives up so many walks. But like he won't throw stuff that's hittable. He won't throw stuff that's smashable. Because his barrel rate against is very low. So I think that might help him in Dodger Stadium. And then he's obviously going to get like killer run support. If you're in a wins league, like Snell is going to be a big time guy if you're in a wins league. So I kind of like Snell going to the Dodgers for this season. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I mean, especially like you said, for his wins and whatnot. And I was going to mention, the first thing that came to my mind when he went there is the 6-man rotation. But I feel like a lot of teams are starting to trend that way, not just the Dodgers because of Ohtani now, but I feel like a lot of teams are having this 6-man rotation because of injury, because of some young arms that they're bringing up and trying to give them some more recovery time. So throwing that out the window, like you said, you're higher on Snell than I would have been. I would have taken, I think, almost everyone in this tier down to Cole. I would put him behind Cole Reagans if it were me, just because I'm not a big Snell believer, but I'm big in buying in Snell or trading for him after his first half, basically, because it happens every year with Snell. I mean, we've seen it the last 3 years now, where he starts off rough, buy low on him, and then he's a rock star the rest of the way.
Yeah, if that occurs again. I mean, he last year it was kind of a weird situation where he signed so late. But yeah, it's been a repeating pattern for him. So I don't know. I think I agree with you. The 6-man rotation is going to be good for someone like him. I mean, like just like how it was better for Glass now, right? That he could kind of spread himself out. He pitched a career high, even though when we talk about Glass now, he could pitch a career high innings, but it was something like 132 innings or something like that. But like talking about 6-man, I think, and we haven't talked about an Orioles pitcher yet, but I think there's a good chance that the Orioles go 6-man. They brought in Sagano, who's a Japanese guy. They brought in Charlie Morton, who's an older guy and probably won't pitch as many innings as he has been in the past. You got Grayson Rodriguez, who's had some injury problems. I think there's a good chance the Orioles go 6-man. They also have like Povich, who is kind of their 6th starter right now. But I think there's still a chance that the Orioles bring in another pitcher. So like I've seen people who are like, oh, they signed Charlie Morton, they're not going to go get Cease. I think they should still try to, like, even though they got burned by like trading for Corbin Burns and then not being able to re-sign him, I think that they should still try to go after Cease because they need another upper tier pitcher. Like I love Grayson Rodriguez, but I don't think they should rely on him to be their number one. I feel like if they go into the year with him as their number one, that's just asking for problems or like asking to lose in the first round of the playoffs because like, and it's nothing against Grayson, but like, then who's your number two? You know what I mean? Like really Charlie Morton's going to be your number two or Zach Eflin's going to be your number two. Yeah. I think that if you want to be a legitimate playoff team and you're going to be against teams like the Yankees, the Mets, the Dodgers in the playoffs, you need to have, or even like the Diamondbacks now, you need to have like 2 studs at the top of your rotation. Like if you don't have 2 playoff just like killers at the front of your rotation, like they could always trade for someone at the deadline, I guess. But like if you don't have 2 killers in your rotation, I feel like it's going to be rough going. You know what I mean? For any playoff team. So I think they still need to bring someone in, whether that's via trade like a Dylan Cease or whether that's, even trying Jack Flaherty again and see, like they tried it before. It didn't really work for them the first time, but
I'm surprised we haven't heard more, just a side note, from the Orioles in this offseason about trading some of their young bats for some starting pitcher depth. Because, yeah, you look at their fan graphs, it's Eflin, Grayson, Charlie Morton, Kramer, and Sagano as their rotation, and that doesn't scream a good playoff rotation, like you said. So, not going to get them deep. They need to do something.
They're afraid. And I kind of understand it, but they're afraid to like they'll trade some of their secondary prospects, but I feel like they're afraid to trade like a Kobe Mayo or someone like that because the last thing you want to do is trade that guy and then he turns into Austin Riley, and then you're like, you don't want to feel like the Guardians trading Junior Caminero. You don't want to feel like the White Sox trading Fernando Tatis. You don't want to feel like the Dodgers trading Yordan Alvarez. You know what I mean? Like they're so afraid of making that mistake that they won't trade any of those guys, even though they probably should. Which I think that if they were to trade for Dylan Cease, they could probably get him for less than a Kobe Mayo. They might be able to get Cease by trading like a Heston Kjerstad plus one of their outfielders, like Dylan Beavers or something like that. Like, and Preller probably has a few guys selected that he would take because he's like the ultimate scout. He's not good at, in my opinion, the Padres are bad at developing prospects, but they're great at scouting out good prospects and then turning them into really good players. Like they will trade for prospects and then trade those prospects for more talent back that is cheaper. Like I don't even be like how they did with Thorpe last year. Like, would you be surprised to see them add a couple guys and then turn one of them for something else? Like, I think that's something we could see. Maybe they get Povich even. Heston Kjerstad and Povich for Dylan Cease.
Yeah. I don't know who would say no to that. That actually sounds like a pretty good deal.
Yeah. Both parties. Like good deal for both sides.
Yeah, exactly.
So the rest of this tier, the only one that I kind of wanted to talk about is Yamamoto, because I feel like people are going to be down on Yamamoto because he was hurt last year. But like really, Yamamoto did everything that was promised when he was on the field. He had the one bad start at the beginning of the season in Korea or whatever, but besides that, he was a beast. And then like he was good in the playoffs. So for me, I'm going to throw this injury that he had as like a one-time thing because he has a really good track record in Japan of being a durable pitcher. And of course, the Dodgers are going to go 6-man. So they really like if you get 160 innings like that from Yamamoto this year, that's a huge win. And I think that there's a good buying opportunity for Yamamoto this year because I think people are going to be disappointed about the lack of production they got from him due to the injury last year. And I think, oh, everyone thought Yamamoto was going to be an ace. He's not that good. He's more like a top 20, 25 guy. But I think that we're still looking at Yamamoto as like a top 10 to 15 starter as long as he stays on the field.
And that's how he was being drafted last year too. Even just looking at your spreadsheet, having the 140 future, he's up there with the guys in the first tier. He's still 26 years old. He has room to grow. And yeah, if he stays healthy, I almost look at pitchers as a whole. If they can get me like 150 innings now at this point, because it feels so hard to ask anyone to even get 180. So if I can bank on 150 and see what they're going to do off that 150, I'm going to want the top tier guys that are going to get good 150 innings, no matter if there's an aisle stint in between there somewhere.
Yeah, I agree with that. Maybe you want to get like one beast. Like you want to get one of these like guys in the next tier who we'll talk about in a second. Or like a Logan Gilbert just to eat inning, just so you have one guy that you can rely on. Like that's what's good about like these Seattle guys, like Gilbert and Kirby, is that those guys are always going to pitch deep into games. Number one, because they are just built like horses. Number two is that they're control pitchers. Like they have good stuff, but they're also control pitchers. And if you can limit walks and limit base runners, you're going to just automatically get deeper into the games. So if you're in a quality starts league, especially, or like a wins league, that's very useful. Obviously, for wins, you need the Mariners to get some offense in there still because their offense is not looking too hot right now. But like that's the benefit of those types of guys. Or like in this next tier 3, or I guess tier 3, we've got like Logan Gilbert and Framber Valdez at the top of the tier. Both of those guys are very similar, where they're just going to get you a ton of innings. They're going to generate a lot of ground balls. They're more control type guys. Like you can see here in the stuff, that Framber stuff is a decent chunk better than Logan Webb's actually. And like I think on a per inning basis, maybe if I'm in a 12 team again, I would take Framber. But I think 15 team or like Otnu, I'll take Logan Webb just because Logan Webb pitches in San Francisco, and that's going to help like for anti-home run reasons. So like I think that depending on your league type, it might be pick one and go with it. Like Webb is also a few years younger, so if you're in a dynasty type league, maybe you pick Webb over Framber just for the years. But you're the Astros fan here. What do you think? You think I have Framber in the right spot here because I have him number 16, or should he be higher?
No, I think it's pretty appropriate. Him and Logan Webb, I mean, they are almost like mirror guys of each other. I always see them coming into seasons that way just because of their ground ball. I feel like Framber gets knocked around because he's not a big K pitcher, but he got over 200 in 2023. He gets 169 last year, so he's still going to give you some decent Ks if you're looking for that stat. I'm hoping the Astros are going to get some more outfield so they can boost their lineup so he can get more wins. I think that was the advantage that he had over Logan Webb in the past, but I don't know. Just because I'm a homer, I'd put Valdez right above Webb, but they're right there. But I do think he's probably a third tier now, where last year I'd probably put him in the second tier.
Yeah, and this third tier, I mean, like it's still, these are all aces still, so like nothing against this tier here. So this tier, I'll read it off. It's 15 Logan Webb, 16 Framber, 17 Jacob deGrom, 18 Hunter Green, 19 Shane McClanahan, 20 Spencer Schwellenbach, 21 Zach Gallen, 22 Brian Wu, 23 Bybee, 24 Shane Baz, 25 Garrett Cole, 26 Gray Rod, and 27 is Spencer Strider, closing out that tier. So this tier, you'll notice that there's a lot of young up and coming guys. There's a lot of injury rebound guys, and then you have some innings eaters here between like Webb and Framber and Zach Gallen, who are more like just innings eater type. Like they're going to get innings. They're going to have enough Ks that because of the innings too, that they're going to generate enough Ks for you. and they're not going to give up a ton of runs. They'll give you, 3 to 3.5 ERA, somewhere in that range. But then we have here, like, I guess the big names that are interesting is like Jacob deGrom, Shane McClanahan, both coming off of injuries. Obviously, Spencer Strider later in the tier. But like, what do you think about these injury rebound guys? Like, are you going to be in on them? Like, are you drafting deGrom or McClanahan? Or like, if you are, do you want to pair one of them with like someone like a Weber or Valdez just so you like balance out some of the risk? Like, what are your thoughts?
Oh, 100%. I see drafting pitchers the similar way that you're drafting in a categories league. Like if you get big power, you want some steals to pair with it, or you want some average. For pitchers, it's I want some innings eaters that I know are reliable, and then I want those high upside guys. Like I want the lottery ticket. Hey, if DeGrom stays healthy for 160 innings, I could have the number one pitcher in baseball. Same with McClanahan, same with Strider. It's all about pairing with pitchers, because if you get 2 or 3 of those guys and they all go down to injury, then you're like Raymond and you're screwed. So I'd like to have at least one of these upside, hey, if they hit, then they hit big kind of guys on my team when drafting.
Yeah, like DeGrom, McClanahan, Strider. Like I said, they could all be tier 1 pitchers pretty easily. Interesting in this tier. What do you think about my ranking of Garrett Cole? Like, I've got him at 25.
It feels very low.
Lowest, I might be the lowest person.
Yeah.
I haven't looked at other people's rankings really yet, and I know I'm releasing my rankings a lot earlier than other people have been. But I just feel like with the injury risk, because he had the elbow issues and then there was no surgery, and like to me that just leaves a lot of questions. And he had his worst year last year. He is 34 years old now. Is this like the beginning of a decline for him, or it was last year an oddity, right? Like that's what I'm trying to figure out with him. And like I had some Garrett Cole last year and it kind of like backfired on me, because when you pick Garrett Cole last year, you're like, I'm picking Garrett Cole because he does the same thing every year. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's like why you'd pick a Logan Gilbert. So like, to me, I have enough questions about Garrett Cole and like what he can do that like I'm just gonna move him down under someone with like a Hunter Green, right? Like you see Garrett Cole has an actual 118 fScore versus Hunter Green's 114. But in my mind, Hunter Green with the upside here, like Hunter Green's 25. He should be,
right.
He has not even reached his peak yet. And we saw last year at the second half, he was fire. So we could be seeing like the start of like Hunter Green's like, being a top tier ace. And like that's the way he was trending. So like I'm willing to gamble on like a Hunter Green upside pick over a Garrett Cole, or I'm willing to gamble on a Shane McClanahan rebound off the TJ, or a Jacob deGrom, even though deGrom is older than Cole. And a part of that is because deGrom just had the TJ, so he should, unless there's a failed Tommy John like what happened to Cole Reagans, like he should be able to pitch like 130 innings next year. You know what I mean? Pending, some sort of other injury, like shoulder or knee or whatever. Like, you figure his arm should be good for like 130 innings coming off of Tommy John last year.
Yeah, and I think 2 things can be true for Cole. Like, do I think that this is the start of the decline? Yes. Do I think it's that steep? Probably not. I think last year was a bit of an oddity because Garrett Cole has been, the top pitcher. And yeah, it is a little scary him not getting that surgery. But I mean, towards the end of the season, we started seeing him come back to form a little bit. I guess what does make me nervous, he pitched 1 game that was 9 innings, but everything after that was basically 6 or less innings. I think that just attributes to them trying to get him to the playoffs last year too, because the Yankees were a World Series bound team, and they wanted those innings in the playoffs. I'm not trying to make excuses for him, but I still think that he's a guy that if he's on, his slider was off a lot last year, and I think that was his big out pitch, and that was getting him into trouble. It was leaking a lot, so I still think he's higher. I still think he has the ace outcome. You have him tiered that same way with guys that, hey, if they're right, they could be an ace. So I think the tier's right. I think that he could be higher, though, in the tier.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I wouldn't blame anyone for putting Garrett Cole over ahead of like a Webb or a Framber just because of the potential upside in the Ks that you can get out of him. So I wouldn't blame someone for doing that, and especially over ahead of like a Bybee. Some of that has to do with like age, right? Like where they are in their career arcs. Like some guys are going to be older and getting worse, and some guys are right in that peak area here. Like Bybee and Boz are both 26 years old. Boz is another interesting one that I've had some discussion about with some people. I traded for Boz in our fantasy Aceball invitational league not too long ago. It was like a week ago or something. And Raymond was just like, after I made that trade, he's like, "Oh, you're buying back in on Boz, huh? Like you're really believing it." If you look at Boz's game log, he started really rough when he first came back. And he was bad in the minors before he came back from the injury. But by the end, he had some really strong starts at the end of the season. And he had like an under 1 whip over his last 10 starts. So I'm thinking that a lot of his struggles last year had to do with him trying to regain himself after the Tommy John surgery. And his stuff plus, like his let me pull it up real quick because I don't want to speak out of hand here, but like his stuff last year, his stuff plus on his fastball last year was a 121 stuff plus, and his stuff plus overall was 115. He had 3 pitches with over a 110 stuff plus. The fastball is 121, the slider 111, and the curve 119. So the stuff was all there. It was him just kind of regaining his command, I think, and we saw that get better by the end of the year. He actually finished the year with a 106 whip, which is really good. So I'm expecting Boz to kind of take this next step forward that we were hoping to see from him when he first came up, now that he's healthy. And I think that his upside is just as good as some of these other types, which is why I put him in this tier, because you might think like that's pretty aggressive to put him in this tier. Maybe some people might think I should put him like the next tier down, right? Where I have like a Jared Jones or something like that. But like, I think that Boz has just a lot. I think his stuff is better than someone like Jared Jones, like just in general. I think the upside's higher than like a Jared Jones or his teammate Ryan Pepio. So like I look at Shane Boz and I think he could be a top 10 starter. And so I put him here because I think he could reach that upper tier. There's a possibility of him reaching that upper tier. Whereas like I don't see a Jared Jones or Joe Ryan, for example, being a top 5 starter. You know what I mean?
Man, the Jared Jones versus Shane Boz. Coming into this, I've been burnt. I think I've been burnt on Shane Boz too much, and it's that name that I just see, and like I've drafted him 3 years in a row or 2 years in a row, whatever it's been, and he's just let me down every year. And I've held on to him, and I've not picked up other guys, and so that's just in the back of my mind with him. I think also, are you not worried about where Tampa's going to play this year and their ballpark factor to some of these race pitchers?
Oh, I'm worried about it 100%.
Okay.
And I'm especially worried about it with like Pepio, for instance. I'm less worried about it for McClanahan because McClanahan's a lefty. So like just how like why the Yankees are signing all these lefty pitchers, right? I think because basically the Rays Park, if you're unaware, for any listeners unaware, the Rays Park is the Yankees minor league park for the season, Steinbrenner Field. And Steinbrenner Field is built to have the same exact dimensions as Yankee Stadium. So if you want park factors, all you have to do basically is look at Yankee Stadium. You might have a little bit less, like as far as power. So like the home run park factor might be a little diminished just because it's in Florida. So it's at sea level. So even though, Yankee Stadium, I don't know it's not just in the mountains, you know what I mean? So like it's not high up, but it's also not at 1 foot above sea level like most of Florida is. So like you might get a little bit better on the home runs than you would at Yankee Stadium. But Boz traditionally, or like last year at least, he was pretty good about not giving up homers. Like in the past, actually, I mean, he only had a 40 inning sample size in the majors before last season. But in the past, he had given up some homers, but last year he did pretty good at avoiding that kind of damage. So I'm less concerned for Boz, and I think also because he's more of a swing miss type than I am for a guy like Pepio.
Yeah, that's true. I was looking at his home run to fly ball ratio, and it's gone down every year. Granted, he has super small sample sizes, from 21-22 and last year. So, but if you're going just off that, it's gone down from 23 to 19 to 9. So, yeah, you want some swing and miss pitchers, especially in these ballparks where home runs are prevalent.
And then, like, just to compare Boz to Grayson Rodriguez real quick, you might say, like, why do you have Boz ahead of Grayson Rodriguez? Grayson Rodriguez has shown us more. He's pitched more innings, yada, yada. I love Grayson Rodriguez, but a couple concerns here. Number one is that we all saw, anyone who's a big fantasy baseball person, probably anyone listening to this podcast, has seen that chart that was going around Twitter or whatever last year, where it showed the top 10 guys in velocity and if they had Tommy John. And everyone, or if they were hurt, everyone on that list was like getting Tommy John except for Grayson Rodriguez, and he hasn't gotten it yet. So just that chart alone scares me a little bit for a guy like him who's like velocity based because he hasn't had the surgery yet. And Boz is coming off of it. So, like, again, he's probably unlikely to get it in the next few years here because he just had it, unless they really screwed up the first one. But he pitched enough innings last year to kind of show that he should be fine. Whereas, like, Cole Reagans, when he had to get his second Tommy John in a row, I didn't even know if he pitched. And then he just, like he had it in 2 consecutive years. So I don't even know, like, how much he threw. He didn't pitch in professional. I think he just started warming up and it was, I guess it didn't work. And then had to get it again. So, like, I think Boz threw enough innings to kind of relieve me of that kind of concern. But the fact that Grayson Rodriguez is on that, like, heat chart of, like, okay, these are all the guys who throw the hardest and they're all hurt. And he's like, I don't know. It's like, you know, that the meme that goes around where the Grim Reaper goes through all the doors and, like, knocks people off. I just feel like Grayson Rodriguez is, like, possibly that, like, next door for the Grim Reaper. Yes. And I don't want to put any juju on him because I love him. But, I don't know. I have concern about that. And due to that, I'm willing to take Boz ahead of him just because I think the injury risk is less, which is kind of crazy because you look at the innings.
It's a weird thing.
Jason Rodriguez has pitched way more innings than Boz has over their short careers, but that's just the way that I feel with the way that ligaments go. So next tier down, which is tier 4, is going to start with number 28, Brandon Pfaadt, 29, your boy Hunter Brown, 30, Joe Ryan, 31, Tyler Glasnow, 32, Roki Sasaki, 33, Jared Jones, 34, Ryan Pepio, 35, Shota Imanaga, and 36, Pablo Lopez. This is a really good tier 2. I would not want to draft one of these guys, though, as an ace for me.
No.
The tier above, I would be fine if these guys were, like, seen as my ace on my fantasy team. Like, if my ace is Shane McClanahan in a 15-team league, I'm feeling pretty good about that, I think, coming off surgery. But, like, if my ace in a 15-team league is Tyler Glasnow, I'm going to be concerned if he is, and not because of performance. I'm going to be concerned because he's not going to get the innings I need. If my ace, or if my ace is like Pablo Lopez, even though I like Pablo Lopez and I think he's due for major positive regression for this year, I'm still not going to be feeling good about him as an ace. Like, if he's my number 2, I feel a lot better. Or like a Hunter Brown, I would love for Hunter Brown to be my number 2 this year, but I would not want him to be my ace. So what do you think about this tier here?
I feel like this tier is basically, these are solid number 2s that, like, I could see a Pablo Lopez. I'm excited to see Roki Sasaki. This is the one name, and I think it's highlighted because he's a free agent too, and we don't know where he's signed yet. But I'm just excited to see where he signs because he's been, like, the talk of the town, and we're still waiting to see where he signs. But these are, like, number 2s that for stretches can go on ace runs. Like Hunter Brown last year, after getting what was the game I was watching that game live? He gave up like 13 runs in an inning, and I was like, all right, the Hunter Brown experiment is starting to come down, and then he went on a tear in the second half. So these are guys that I think you would love to have. They're good depth. Mostly younger guys, except for your Glasnows and Shotas, but I like them. There's a good solid 2s. They're solid 2s on their respective teams for the most part too. So they kind of just fit that role.
Yeah, Hunter Brown was awesome in the second half. That's a big part of him in this tier here. Brandon Pfaadt was super underrated last year. Like, I think the biggest positive regression candidates that I can think of off my top of my head are Pfaadt and Pablo Lopez. Those 2 guys are so due for positive regression. Like Fott was really good last year, and nobody's really realizing, I think, how good he actually is. And his control has gotten better last year. The home runs went down last year. They were getting better. He was getting better about preventing home runs. Joe Ryan is really good when he's healthy. I like his. I'm concerned, just like I am with Garrett Cole, with Joe Ryan for this year, the way their seasons ended, and even Glasnow. Glasnow had a pretty rough second half. He was amazing in the first half, maybe the best pitcher in baseball in the first half, but the second half was a little rough for him. He started giving up a bunch of homers, and he had missed time from injury. So some of these guys who, had some injury concerns near the end of the year last year, Cole, Ryan, Glasnow, I'm just a little concerned about some of these guys who have shown ace upside before. And Roki, it's just hard for me to pick a guy who, even though I think he's gonna be awesome when he comes over, I think he's only probably gonna pitch 130 innings. He didn't pitch that many innings in Japan last year. It was 70 or something like that. I looked it up when I put his fScores in because I have a correlation sheet just for Japanese pitchers that I used with Imanaga and Yamamoto. Had a pretty good success last year. I was pretty spot on in my rankings between where I had those guys last year and where they ended up using my correlation sheet. So I kind of expect Roki to be in the same kind of area here. You can see that it loves him on a per inning basis, 118 F stuff, but his durability is only 70 because he just last year he didn't pitch a lot of innings. He's coming over, probably going to be a 6-man rotation type scenario with him. Even there's some teams, depending on where he goes, what if there's a team that wants to see him pitch in AAA a couple games before he comes up? It wouldn't surprise me if something like that happened. He's only 23 years old. So it's hard for me to put a guy like Roki ahead of someone like Tyler Glasnow for that reason.
Did Roki get surgery? I know you didn't put it on here, but I vaguely remember hearing about him having some arm issues, and that's why he missed some time over in Japan. I feel like he had some arm issues, and maybe he just didn't. He just got shut down and did the rehab, but he's a hard-throwing guy.
I don't think he had a surgery, but he was definitely shut down just to keep him down. He had so last year he had an oblique injury, and he only pitched 91 innings. I think before then he was pitching 130, 140 pretty much every year, which most Japanese pitchers don't pitch more than 160 innings in a year, just because they play less games than they do in the MLB, and they also have 6-man rotations over there. So even a guy, I think Yamamoto is probably going 8 innings every time over there or something like that. But even he was only pitching 150 or 160 innings or something over there. So just something to keep in mind with any Japanese pitcher, that you're probably not going to get 200 innings out of any of them, especially when they first come up, unless you're Yu Darvish and they're over here for a couple of years and then they build up to it. So that is just something to keep in the back of the mind. Anyone else in this tier you want to talk about?
No one that stands out. I agree with the positive regression with Pablo Lopez, especially towards that second half. It's the last third of the year, really, where he kind of turned it on, and it was just waiting for it. So I think he's due for some good positive regression. A guy that used to be an ace too, and these are just kind of falling off aces. But I like Pablo a lot, especially if you can get him as your 36 pitcher.
Yeah, and you can see too 159 beta. So that kind of shows that underlying he is pretty steady year over year. So I wouldn't expect anything weird to happen. He's still 29, so he should be pretty fine as far as not expecting the volatility that we saw this year. I think it's just kind of an outlier, just kind of a weird year for him. I don't think I would expect that to continue. The next tier down is a smaller tier. We've got Sonny Gray at 37, 38 is Shohei Ohtani, 39, Nate Eovaldi, 40, Max Fried, 41, Cutter Crawford, 42, Taj Bradley, and 43, Gavin Williams. So this tier is kind of interesting because it's not great. If I'm picking from this tier, I probably want these guys not to be a number 2 pitcher for me. I would want them to be more a number 3 pitcher for me. I don't think I'd be happy going into a season where Taj Bradley is my number 2 starter, or Nate Eovaldi. Ohtani, I guess you could, or Sonny Gray in some deep leagues you could see as an okay number 2 starter, I guess. Ohtani is going to be limited innings wise though. like 100%. Like I would be kind of surprised. I don't know about you. I probably would be surprised if he pitches more than 120 innings this year. Like, what do you think?
Yeah, I can see that. Especially without, I feel like they're being so shady with his injury too. They never really disclosed it, but wasn't it the internal brace, or do we even know what it was fully?
Yeah, they did internal brace, and I think, and this is the weird thing is like, or just the thing to keep in mind. In 2021, he only pitched 130 innings. 2023, he pitched 132 innings. So the only time he's pitched more than that was 2022. He pitched 166 innings, which was one of his MVP seasons, right? But I think that was with LA. I don't expect him to ever pitch that even close to that many innings again. Because if you're the Dodgers, are you really going to risk losing that bat in your lineup by pitching him that many innings? Like, I just don't really see it. I see him as, okay, he's going to pitch one out of every 6 days, and he's going to go 6 innings, and you're not going to push it. You know what I mean? Like, you're not going to have him throw 115 pitches in a game. Like, he's going to be throwing like probably in the 80s, right? Because you don't want it. You don't even want to push it. You don't want to risk the chance that you're going to lose his bat in the lineup. Like, his bat is so good, you don't want to risk that. So I think that he's going to be really baby this year, and I think he's going to be good when he pitches. But I just think he's going to be on limited innings. Whereas like a guy like Sonny Gray and Nate Eovaldi are like probably banked, and Fried and Cutter Crawford. These are all guys that are going to be banked for probably like 170-ish innings, something like that. They're all, like in Gray and Eovaldi's case, they're both older, so they're probably not going to, there's going to be decline. You can actually see it in the future fScore that they're both heading down. So fScores are projecting them to start the downward trajectory of their careers here. Bradley and Gavin Williams are kind of like upside plays if you're going for them. Like Taj Bradley has really good strikeout stuff, but just like I said with Pepio, I'm so concerned about homers. Like Taj Bradley gives up so many home runs already. Like now he's going to be going to that minor league Yankee Stadium, and he's a righty, he's a lefty. So
Taj is someone I'm avoiding this year. I think mainly because of the new ballpark, and I don't know. He's so hit or miss though too. I mean, there's games where he's striking out 9 and going deep, but it's also the Rays, and this is what his 3rd year now, and so I just don't really want any part of Taj this year. And I'm surprised too in this tier that you have Cutter Crawford as high as you do. I don't know if you want to break that down, but I feel like there's other names I would put above Cutter Crawford, even looking at the next tier.
Yeah, a lot of that is just due to underlying metrics. So, for instance, Cutter Crawford has a 109 stuff plus on the fastball, 108 stuff plus in general, 112 whip with a pretty good first pitch strike rate of right under 64%. So like all the underlying metrics actually look a lot better than just like if you look at ERA or Sierra, just like standard metrics like that, or like even K to walk is only 16%. So it's just kind of like, okay, he looks like a top 40 starter or whatever. But like the underlying stuff that we see in his actual like stuff plus, it shows like he should be better. Like he's got, again, 3 pitches that are 109 stuff plus or better, which is really good. If you have 3 plus pitches like that, like the fastball is 109, the slider is 110, the cutter's 114. And he still has a knuckle curve too that rates at 98. So like he has the tools to be better, and we saw it in the first half with him. Like his first half last year was really strong, and I don't know what happened, if he just got worn out or really like what happened, but like the first half last year, let me look it up real quick. He had a 3.54 ERA and 17 K minus walk, so not anything special, but like he's just a guy that like metrically looks like he should be better in all the underlying stuff, which is why his fScores are so high compared to like maybe someone like Freddie Peralta that is down in the next tier, or like Justin Steele, who always has a low ERA. And it just almost is like the next iteration of Kyle Hendricks, right? Where you're like, this guy always has a low ERA and he pitches deep. I don't really know how he's doing because his stuff isn't that good. and he's only has 2 pitches, but he's making it happen. So I don't know. like after you do that for enough years, are you going to bet against it? Probably not. You're probably going to bet that Steele's going to keep doing what he's doing, even though you don't understand how he keeps doing it. I think just Cutter Crawford, the metrics show that he could be better if he takes that next step, and that's why I have him there. Is that the underlying metrics are showing that there's a better pitcher there than what we've seen to date.
Okay. Yeah, I was just like looking at his xFIT too. He ranks 103rd qualified pitchers in like his xFIT. But if you're going off Stuff Plus and like everything underlying, I can see that. But I guess I have to take the names out of it. Like we were talking beforehand, like taking the names completely out of it and removing that, because Cutter Crawford, I'd have to look deeper into him.
Yeah. So basically what you're getting at before we started the podcast is that's telling you that like what I'm trying to do this year with a lot of these rankings, and like you saw if you listen to the Outfield podcast, Raymond had convinced me to move some guys around based on kind of name value and reputation and stuff like that. So I moved some guys around because when I put the numbers in, I was trying not to look at names. I would just plug the numbers in and move guys up or down the rankings based on what the numbers are showing, rather than like the actual name there. Because like if you look in the next tier, there's a lot of big names that you'd be like, why is a Cutter Crawford or a Taj Bradley ahead of like Yu Darvish, big name, Freddie Peralta, big name, Aaron Nola, Luis Castillo, big names, right? So like those are generally guys who are rated as being aces, and people think of them as ace tier or second starter tier. But then I was just saying like I wouldn't want any of these guys to be my second starter in this tier here. So
right.
I think it's just a part of it is like trying to separate the names from the actual numbers. If you're looking at the names and you're drafting live and you're like, oh God, I have Cutter Crawford available or I have Luis Castillo. Like if you just look at the names and you're not thinking about the numbers, or you don't have a draft cheat sheet in front of you, everyone's going to just reach for Luis Castillo ahead of Cutter Crawford. But that might not be the right move. Maybe it is if he stays in Seattle. I don't know. That also depends on like if he gets traded to Boston or something like that could hurt him. So
right.
Something to talk about as we get into this next tier here. So this next tier, like I said, is kind of interesting names here. It's 44 Carlos Rodon, 45 Yusei Kikuchi, 46 Bailey Ober, 47 Christopher Sanchez, 48 Yu Darvish, 49 Kodai Senga, 50 Justin Steele, 51 Freddie Peralta, 52 Tanner Houck, 53 Seth Lugo, 54 Luis Heel, 55 Aaron Nola, and 56 Luis Castillo. And I could guarantee you that pretty much in any rankings, you're not going to find Nola or Luis Castillo in the 50s. You're only 100%. Finding that in this fScore, in my fScore rankings here. And so interesting tier here. Who do you want to talk about? And like who out of all these names stands out to you the most of who should be up or who should be down? Is Luis Castillo like the biggest name to you that like, because I already know because we talked before in FAI, I was trying to trade Freddie Peralta, and I already know that you already told me you're not in on Freddie this year yourself. So yeah. I'm not the only one here. So what do you think about this tier here?
I think a sleeper name to kind of talk about that I think could be higher, and it's not the Aaron Nola, Castillo, Freddie Peralta, Steele. I think it's Christopher Sanchez, weirdly enough, especially in a league like your own new leagues where home runs hurt. Christopher Sanchez, he was 5th in all of qualified pitchers in ground ball percentage, 11th out of all in FIP. And his Stuff Plus, it's not the best. He still ranks within top 100 pitchers. And that could come back to bite him. I think he's still in a good lineup if you need some wins. He gets you some innings. And he was pretty good last year. So I feel like a weird sleeper in all of this is Christopher Sanchez. I think he can actually bump up to the tier above that.
I like that. Is he a poor man's Logan Webb?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And you can get him discounted, 5-6 rounds later? Just depending on how your league's drafting. I think he's definitely a cheap version because he's not a big name value at all.
Yeah, I agree. I like Christopher Sanchez a lot more this year than I did last year. Part of that might just be that I saw another year of him being good. And I was like, okay, it's not fake. Because sometimes when you get these pop-up guys who are not prospects and they're like 26 or whatever, and they come out of nowhere and are really good with a 2 ERA, like, I don't know if I believe that fully. Like something might be off here. But I think that at this point, he's pretty much proven that he is who he's been. Then there's a bunch of guys in this tier, like Rodon, Kikuchi, are both super volatile. So it's like, are you going to get good Rodon or bad Rodon? Are you going to get Astros Kikuchi or are you going to get Blue Jays Kikuchi? Like, which one are we going to get here, right? Justin Steele, like I said, he's a 2-pitch guy. That's always going to concern me. I mean, he's been doing the same thing every year, so for 3 years running or whatever now. So like maybe I shouldn't be so concerned, but 2-pitch starter is concerning. Freddie Peralta, you've got home run problems, bad second half. Aaron Nola, again, home run problems. So like Nola is a guy that if you're in a regular league, if you're in just like a regular roto league, you're probably going to like a little bit better than if you're in a points league where like odd new league where homers just destroy you, because he's just always been one of these guys who gives up a bunch of homers no matter what kind of year he's having. Even if he's putting up a really good year, he still gives up a bunch of homers. So that's concerning. Luis Castillo, I really don't even understand why the fScores don't like him so much, to be honest, because I think he's really good. I don't know if that's something with his second half, if there was just mad like decline in his second half numbers. I have to actually look that up because it's been so long since I worked at the top and worked my way down. So it's probably been like 2 weeks since I actually entered his scores into my algorithm here. But let me see. Let's look at his second half real quick here. So in the second half last year, he actually was pretty decent. He was fine. So he did give up a decent amount of homers though. So that might be part of it. Is he had like a 13.5 homer to fly ball rate. But whip wise, 1.11, K per 9, almost 19, 3.5 ERA. I don't really see why the scores don't like him so much for this year. It might just be that he's entering 32 and some pitchers decline at that age. Like the standard pitcher declining ages seem to be like 32 and like 35, 36. And then there's also like 38, 39 for like the super Hall of Fame type guys. So that could be part of it, is there just might be like an aging curve thing built in that's hitting him a little bit here on the fScores. I will probably move him up or down from this point, depending on where he ends up. If he stays in Seattle, I'm probably going to move him up to this tier up here. Because like if I'm drafting him, I'm probably going to be drafting him this year ahead of Taj Bradley. Like I was just thinking about as we were saying here live here on the pod. But if he moves to a Boston, or if he moves to I don't know what other teams might trade for him at this point.
Baltimore? If Baltimore wants to send some hitters over there?
Baltimore has a pretty good ballpark for him. I would ding him a little bit, but I would probably still move him up if he ends up in Baltimore.
Right.
Boston is really the one that concerns me the most, because he's a righty, and that means he's going to be prone to giving up doubles against the Green Monster. So that would concern me a little bit. I'm probably still going to move him up either way, though. Like I can't imagine myself looking at a draft sheet and drafting Seth Lugo ahead of Luis Castillo, no matter what these
I also think
are telling me. So I think I've got to. I'll just move him up live here. I think I've got to move him up. I've got to move him up at least ahead of like Yu Darvish. I think.
Move him up ahead of. Oh.
I think no matter where he ends up, I'm drafting him here. I don't know if I'm gonna. I might draft Sanchez ahead of him still, though. So I think I'm gonna probably keep that there. But that all depends on where he goes. If he ends up in Boston, I'm probably gonna pick Sanchez ahead of him. But if he stays in Seattle or ends up with Baltimore, then I'm probably moving up into this next tier here, I want to say. Aaron Nola, I'm not going to give that benefit of the doubt to. I think I'm going to leave Nola where I've got him. I just don't really trust Nola. He's always just like a little volatile. Luis Heel is an interesting one because his stuff is so high, right? Like 112 F stuff, but his control is so bad. So it's like, what do you do with a guy like that?
He's a poor man's Blake Snell. That's what he is.
Yeah.
He's a poor man's Blake Snell.
I mean, he was fire last year. Like he was so good, but can we trust that guy, he's going to be doing that again? Like, I don't know. Like, for instance, are you going to draft Freddie Peralta or Luis Heel? They're kind of both similar guys, to be honest.
I would draft Freddie over Luis. Well, yeah, I'd draft Freddie over Luis Heel.
Yeah. You know what, though? I think I'm I'm upside guy. I'm still going to draft heel overhead like Seth Lugo. Like no matter how good Seth Lugo was last year, he was really good. He's in a good ballpark. Like Kansas City's a great ballpark. But even like Houck, like I'm drafting heel over Houck. I'll take that upside. But yeah, I think like even probably I'll take Aaron Nola over Lugo. Lugo was really good last year. It wouldn't surprise me if he does it again. But
are you trusting a 35-year-old that's really been kind of the first time he's done it?
Yeah, as a starter. I mean, he was always a pretty
as
good
a starter that good, right?
Yeah. I think this is good for now. I'm just as a placeholder. If you're watching this live or listening to this live, Luis Castillo is going to be an up or down guy depending on where he gets traded or if he doesn't get traded. That's just going to affect his value. And for whatever reason, fScores doesn't like him. I can't even tell you why. Like, I can't even tell you where in the algorithm fScores are not liking him. So it's just the way it is. The next tier here is 57 Kumar Rocker, 58 Brandon Woodruff, 59 Clark Schmidt, 60 Nick Pivetta, which also is a guy who could move up or down based on where he ends up because fScores really love Pivetta, but like it just really kind of can depend on where he goes. If he goes to a better ballpark than Boston, then he's going to be moving up. He might move up into the next tier even. 61 Drew Rasmussen, 60 who's actually not projected to be in the rotation right now, which is crazy. And it shows you how deep the Rays are. 62 Bowden Francis, 63 Griffin Jacks in the event he becomes a starter. 64 Jose Soriano, 65 Jack Flaherty, 66 Quinn Matthews, 67 David Festa, 68 Mackenzie Gore, and 69 Spencer Arrighetti. What do you think about this tier? We got some rookies in this tier. Makes it fun.
Yeah, it does. It's surprising. You say Nick Pivetta can move up or down. And just looking, if you want to talk stuff plus, he had the best stuff plus out of any pitcher last year, better than Jared Jones and Hunter Green and Logan Gilbert. But man, he was so back and forth. But if you take the name out of it, he's a guy that I guess like how I feel like you see Cutter Crawford, I feel like he should be better and could be better. He's a guy that I think
end up in Toronto, man. He's a Canadian guy. The Blue Jays can't get anyone to want to go to Canada, because the taxes there are insane. That's why. Like, if you're wondering, like, why nobody likes Canada? Is it like just an anti-Canadian thing? Everyone wants to be American. And a big part of it is the taxes. Like, I think the tax rate in Canada is something like 60%. Like, it's like insane. It makes California's taxes seem low. That's how high the tax rate is there.
That's wild.
So you have to take into account that if the Blue Jays sign someone, they're probably going to just have to give them some huge signing bonus. Like some American guy, they're just be like, okay, buy a house in Florida. We'll give you a signing bonus in Florida, so you don't have to pay taxes on it. We'll just pay you like a $70 million signing bonus or whatever, just because the taxes are so bad there. Like, they're insane. So just something to keep in mind if you're just like, why can't the Blue Jays get anyone? It is the taxes, friends. It is the taxes. It's all about the money. So, but he is familiar because he's a Canadian guy. So I could really see Pivetta back to Canada type thing here. And that'd be good for him, actually, because Boston is one of the rougher stadiums to pitch in for any pitcher. So that'd be a pro. That'd be a plus for him. If he can go into any plus stadium, there's only like 5 stadiums that are worse than Boston for a pitcher. So like, just keep that in mind that that means there's like an 80% chance that he's going to end up going to a better stadium, probably.
Yeah, he's definitely a guy I think he can move up. Drew Rasmussen, I'm shocked he's not listed in the rotation, but if he does stay as a relief pitcher, depending on how league formats work out, if he is out of the bullpen and he's he follows an opener kind of guy, he's a steal as an RP that you can just plug in and get some innings out of. Because I think if he follows an opener, gets you 3-4 innings, going to get you some strikeouts, and goes to long, he's basically another starter that you can plug in as an RP. So I do think he's going to get a starting rotation spot, though. Injuries are going to happen, but he's definitely a guy I think is of value as a spark.
Yeah, and you can see I mark in, if you're looking in the spreadsheet, anyone who's marked with the yellow is a free agent still. Anyone with the little orange color here is a sparp, where they're probably going to be starting as a reliever, but they could become a starter. I agree with you. I think that it also would make sense because he's a 2-time Tommy John guy. He also had a failed Tommy John. You can see 2016, 2017. Then he was a reliever. The Brewers traded him to the Rays. Rays made him a starter. They're probably going to be more careful with him. I think he just had a shoulder injury was the injury that he had last year. So this is a dude who gets hurt a lot, but is really effective when he pitches, and he's still only 29. So I think that they're going to be a little careful with him coming into the season, which is maybe why he's not listed as a starter right now. And like you were saying, they might have him pitch in like little 2, 3, 4 inning stints at first and kind of build him up as the season goes on. Like I would not be surprised to see that, but I think that by the end of the season, by the second half, he's in the rotation, whether it's because of an injury or Taj Bradley blowups or whatever it could be. I think he's in the rotation by, second half and pitching 5, 6 innings pretty regularly. Griffin Jacks, there have been rumors that Griffin Jacks could, if the Twins trade Pablo Lopez, because apparently they're looking to trade Pablo Lopez, which to me, this is the worst time to trade Pablo Lopez because you're selling low on him. But apparently the Twins are shopping him just because they want to try to cut salary somewhere. So if they traded a Pablo Lopez or something like that, then you could see maybe Griffin Jacks come into the rotation. You can see that he could be like this guy who has a Michael King or Drew Rasmussen type bump moving as a reliever into a starter. He's got multiple plus pitches. He's not a 2-pitch guy. He's a 3, 4-pitch guy as a reliever. Even Jose Soriano, he had been a reliever last year before he became a starter. So some of those names are interesting. What do you think about these young guys? There's a bunch of young guys in this tier here. And we've got also, of course, Brandon Woodruff, which I just don't know what to do this guy. You know what I mean? Like he is a top 10 starter when he's healthy, but we have no idea how he's going to rebound. We have no idea what to expect. This guy could pitch 0 innings next year. Like I have no idea. So for him, it's just a major risk drafting him until we see him in spring and he looks healthy. Like it's just such a risk if you're playing in an early league right now. But this is a dude that if we see him in spring and he's just dominating everybody, I might move him up into the top 20 or 30. You know what I mean? I might move him up right in that tier with Strider and McClanahan and DeGrom because that's what type of pitcher he is when he's healthy. But until I see it, I'm not going to believe it. So I'm going to keep him around here in this area until that happens with these rookies, which I think is a fair place to put them, like these high upside rookies like Kumar Rocker, Quinn Matthews. I think David Festa burned his rookie eligibility. And then Arrighetti, I think, also burned his rookie eligibility, but you got these couple of young guys here, Festa and Arrighetti, and you're an Astros guy, so you might have something to say on Arrighetti. But what do you think about these rookies here in this tier?
They're definitely interesting ones for sure. I love me some Spencer Spaghetti. He shocked me a lot last year. I thought he'd get hit around a lot more. I didn't think the K upside was as high for a guy that threw kind of a low 90s fastball. I'm still kind of in on Mackenzie Gore, as disgusting as it feels to say, just because I feel like he's let me down. But he has a really good stuff plus fastball that grades pretty high as a 124. I mean, he's basically a top 20 overall stuff plus guy that I think would be really good. I think Washington overall is going to have some good pitchers here in the future as well, too. So hopefully that they can build around that and use Mackenzie Gore maybe as a potential ace moving forward. I think he still has a lot of stuff to figure out. And as far as like Kumar Rocker, when he got the call up last year, he was dominating in AAA. So I think he definitely has a shot to move up a couple tiers. But with all these guys, I think the biggest concern is innings, just because they're young for the most part. Especially like you're the Cardinals guy, like Quinn Matthews. How many innings do you think a guy like how many innings do you think he's going to get?
Oh, I think he could pitch 160 innings pretty easy.
Really?
Yeah, he goes deep. Even when he was at Stanford, he was kind of known before he had this big uptick last year of being like, everyone's like, oh, he's going to be a good number 6 starter, number 5 starter or whatever, because he pitched like 150 innings one game in like the NCAA playoffs or whatever. But I think he could go 160. Every time, I saw him, I was lucky enough to see him live. And like every time I was watching him, it was just 6 inning, like pretty much in the minors, 6 innings every time. So I think he's going to be a pretty durable guy when he gets up. It's more of a matter for the Cardinals of are they going to give him the shot to break camp with the team? I think by May he's in that rotation regardless, pitching. But they're talking about possibly trading Fedde. They're talking about possibly trading Steven Matz, which if they do would be good because then you're going to clear room for some of the younger guys like Michael McGreevy who I don't think has nearly the upside of Quinn Matthews, even though he had some pretty good numbers when he was starting for the Cardinals last year. And Quinn Matthews, who I think has the talent to break camp and could, but the Cardinals are generally pretty reserved about that, even though they did allow Mason Wynn to break camp and they did allow Jordan Walker to break camp the year prior. So they've done it with some of their higher end guys, and maybe they feel that Quinn can do that. I think there's a good chance he pitches like 106 innings over the course of the season in AAA and the majors, though. And I think worst case scenario, he's up in May. Like they might try to play the whole Super 2 game or whatever and get an extra year of eligibility from him instead of trying to let him compete for the Rookie of the Year, which like he might be able to do if they just pitched him and let him roll. Because the NL this year, I'm trying to think off the top of my head who else there's going to be in the NL. I guess Sasaki, if he goes to the NL, is going to be a big Rookie of the Year candidate. But to me, a lot of the Rookie of the Year guys are going to be in the American League this year, not the National League. I think Dylan Cruz still qualifies, maybe. I'd have to look at or maybe not. Actually, I think he did pass through his qualification, so maybe not. I'm trying to just think off the top of my head who qualifies, but I think most of the guys that are going to be dangerous hitters are going to be American League guys. So pitchers, it's going to be probably pitchers in the National League. It might be like Bubba Chandler, Quinn Matthews, like guys like that, because like I'm not really sure what other, who else is going to come up and qualify. I have to really dig into that to look into it. But I think that's the thing where you get into, okay, do they want to play the Rookie of the Year game or do they want to try to get an extra year of eligibility? What's, where's the pro, where's the con?
Right. And this might be one of the pitchers that the Cardinals can use that's under 30, outside of Andrew Palante. Yeah. So they can actually finally get younger.
Yeah. Oldest rotation in baseball last year.
Yeah. By a good margin, it felt like too.
Yeah. I think their average age was like 35 or something. So the next tier here, kind of, I like to see these guys as like for fantasy, like number 4, number 5 type guys. But we have here in this next tier, number 70 is Brian Bayo, and it's a big tier. 71, DJ Hers, 72, Zach Eflin, 73, Jesus Luzardo, 74, Nestor Cortez, 75, Kevin Gausman, who, I mean, talk about major movement. He's probably my biggest dropper from last year's rankings to this year's rankings as far as like high-end guys. 76, Jacob Misiorowski, 77, Chris Bubich, who is back from injury. So that's actually a sneaky one to watch, I think, is Chris Bubich for this year. Because fScores love him. 78, Reynaldo Lopez. 79, Brett Lauder. 80, Merrill Kelly. 81, Chris Bassett. 82, Jeffrey Springs. 83, Zebby Matthews. 84, Max Scherzer, who's still unsigned. 85, Bobby Miller. 86, Nick Martinez. 87, Tyler Mahle. 88, Luis Garcia. 89, Jordan Montgomery. 90, Dustin May. 91, Reese Olson. 92, Clay Holmes, who's now a starter, so another Spark guy. And 93, Jackson Jobe. What do you think about this tier here?
Man, it is all over the place. There's some guys, like, has Mizranowski, have the Brewers said that he is going to be a bullpen arm, or are they still leaving the starting role on the table for him?
They have not expressed their intentions yet. But
okay.
We have to keep in mind here that they were pitching him as a reliever at the end of the season in AAA, and he was a lot better when they moved him to the pen because his control is really bad. And then they traded Devin Williams, their closer.
Exactly.
And this is the team that had Josh Hader, who was a starter, and then they moved him to the pen. So it's very possible, based on this team's track record and what we're seeing, that they're signaling to us that the ultimate plan is for him to be in the pen and to maybe win this closer job. Because even though Trevor Megill is solid, he's not bad, right? Like when you think of closer, you don't think of Trevor Megill. He doesn't have that like electric stuff that you want out of a closer, especially when you're talking about the Brewers, who their past 2 closers are Josh Hader and Devin Williams, like the 2 amazing guys. I think that they might try him as a starter in spring or at the beginning of the year just to see how he is. And if he's looking like crap and can't command the zone, then maybe they just give up on it and move him to the pen. So his best value, his best use might actually be as a reliever.
No, I agree, especially with that Devin Williams trade. And then a lot of these guys I feel like are converted sparks. Like You know, you have your Ronaldo Lopez's, who just came over and showed that he did pretty good all season last year. I think DJ Hers even has good upside. You know, I'm kind of bought back in on Jesus Luzardo too. I know I'm bouncing around with the names in this tier, but Jesus Luzardo, he's one of those guys. I feel like if he can stay healthy, and that's the biggest thing with him, with his track record, because his F durability is terribly low. This is one of the lowest ones I've seen on your list at a 40. I think he has some good stuff, and going to Philly, I know the ballpark's a little bit worse, but his chances to get wins, I think, are going to be better.
Oh yeah, and you know the other thing too on that note is Philly seems to have a pretty good, even though we talked about Wheeler earlier, Philly has a pretty good track record of keeping their pitchers healthy. Like Nola has never really had a major injury, and
That's
Wheeler
true.
has been healthy since he's been in Philadelphia. All his injury history was when he was with the Mets. So they must have, like, to me, they have a really good training staff. Even like Bryce Harper. Like Bryce Harper came back in like a record time from his Tommy John. Was he only out for he had Tommy John? He was only gone for like 6 months or something like that. Like, like they have a really good track record of keeping guys healthy and like getting guys back on the field when they do get hurt. So that, you know, when you factor a guy like Luzardo and who's always been really good when he's healthy, but just even when he was back with the A's, has had injury problems year after year after year. Like, I don't know if you could find a better destination, even though, like, yeah, Philadelphia is tough for, you know, giving up homers. Like, it's not the best park for pitchers, but they do have a really good health track record, which is kind of like what this guy needs. Like, who cares if he gives up a few extra dingers every year if he can just stay on the field?
I thought he had a bad after really. Then I saw Dustin May later in there too. Holy cow! Holy cow! Dustin May cannot stay on the field though.
No, he can't, and that's his main thing, right? Like if Dustin May gets on the field, he's still only 27, so I don't know.
Still super young.
Yeah, he's almost like if you look at Drew Rasmussen and Dustin May, they're like kind of similar. With how they have like the back-to-back TJs, and like May is just like a couple years younger, so maybe he can like get to a point where we get a few seasons of actual usability out of him. I don't know though with the Dodgers what they're gonna do. Like they have so many pitchers, they might be better off just throwing him in the pen. You know what I mean? Because they have so many guys now, and even when like between Otani and Yamamoto, and if they get Roki Sasaki too, like there's just so many guys. Like they won't like. What are they going to do? You know what I mean? Like, of course they're going to run into injuries, and they haven't even re-signed Kershaw yet, which is like a guarantee to happen. But yeah, it's just interesting name to watch because if he's a reliever, he's still going to be very good. I don't know who's going to close for the Dodgers this year. This is one thing with them. They've got Evan Phillips, Blake Trinan, and Michael Kopech all in the mix right now to close. I have no idea which one of those guys is going to end up getting the bulk of saves because I'm doing my reliever fScores right now. And with those three guys, I'm just like, I don't even know how to rate them as closer or just like timeshare. And like for all we know, Dustin May emerges as the closer by the end of the year. So
that would be a crazy turn. It might keep them healthy. Actually, I don't hate that idea either.
Yeah. Or even Bobby Miller. There's another guy. Like you've got all these Dodgers here. It's just like, let's figure something out with some of these guys.
Tony Gonsolin too coming back from injury. They have, I think, like 10 starting pitchers that would be even number 2s and 3s in some other teams. So
yeah. Some interesting names also to watch here in this tier that I want to bring up before we jump to the next one. And we're getting close to an hour and a half. So we might do one more tier, which is going to get us through 100 names. And then we'll come back for a second podcast on the rest of the names at some point. But some other interesting names. You mentioned DJ Hers. I like Hers a lot. Even though his command has been bad, the track record, it was getting better last year. Like this is the reason DJ Hers was not a top prospect is because his command was so bad in the minors. But you saw from him pretty good command by the end of the year at the major league level. So it might have been one of these instances, which I've talked about a lot, especially in like Prospect One, where like AAA is just really messes pitchers up because you've got like the automated ball strikes, you've got robo umps, you've got all kinds of crap, you've got PCL parks, like you've got all kinds of things in the minors where they're just like changing rules and like that can mess guys up. And then when they get in the majors, you can get a consistent strike zone. You get good umps that all have the similar strike zone. So some of that like change in variability, like just getting things more consistent can help some of these guys who seem like they have wild command in the minors. Rhett Lauder, 141 FERA. This is like really the type of the pitcher that the Reds need in that ballpark, because if you look at Lauder, his stuff doesn't look that great. He's a more of a control guy that is really good at limiting damage. So even though his Sierra and his XFIP last year were pretty bad, his ERA was pretty low, because he's just the type of guy that's going to outperform his metrics, almost like a Justin Steele. And that's good for that ballpark, because that ballpark is rough to pitch in. So I think that's kind of like the right pitcher for the right ballpark for the Reds. I don't think he's going to ever be like an ace type, but maybe in his peak, maybe he can get to become a Logan Webb. You just have to take into account that he's going to be in Cincinnati, so discount the ballpark a little bit. But I think he could get to being like a Logan Webb type pitcher at some point. Jeffrey Springs, interesting name. How much is going to pitch is the big thing with Jeffrey Springs. New venue now. He got traded, so Angels are not known for their for being good with pitchers. So I don't really know like what to expect with Springs, and like we'll see the same thing with Kikuchi too. Just kind of volatile guys. Zebby Matthews, I expect to rebound for a much stronger season for this year. What do you think?
Springs went to the Athletics, didn't he?
Oh, Athletic. That's right. Good call.
That's still not a great place for a pitcher to go. So
no, definitely not. And he's going to be in a minor league ballpark, which we don't even know how to like. I don't know how the park factors are going to contribute to that ballpark. I think it's going to play pretty evenly, actually, from the research I've done. Whereas like the Rays minor league ballpark is going to be much worse. So, but it's not the same thing as pitching in Oakland, which is like the best place to pitch, probably.
Right.
Jordan Montgomery is a weird name. He had a really weird year last year. We might see a rebound from him. So you might be able to get him pretty cheap because his year was so bad last year. Especially like, I don't know. This is the thing. They like said that it's the worst contract, and like I think they want to trade him. If they trade him to a play, like imagine the Rangers traded back for Montgomery cheap or something like that. He had success there, or the Yankees traded back from somewhere where he's had success before, where he could be comfortable. If they do it, that not right before spring training, which is going to give him a weird offseason again. Like if they do it like now within the next month, we might get a nice little bounce back from Jordan Montgomery. And then Jackson Jobe, I have here at the very bottom of this tier. Yeah. I'm already waiting for people to say, why do you have Kumar Rocker and Quinn Matthews ahead of Jobe? Right? Like they're not even in the same tier. They're in a completely different tier. Jobe should probably break camp. Quinn Matthews and Kumar, like I'm expecting Kumar Rocker to break camp. Quinn Matthews might not break camp. It's kind of like 50-50. Jackson Jobe should break camp. I just don't know how often they're going to pitch Jobe. And by my fScore metrics, Kumar Rocker and Quinn Matthews actually just have better stuff by the metrics that I had. Like Jobe, for whatever reason, has good stuff plus numbers, but like he was not getting whiffs. I don't know if it's just the way his pitch mix is and he needs to work on the pitch mix, but like Jackson Jobe was not getting the swing strikes that you would expect from a guy who has the type of pitches that he has. Like in the minor leagues last year, he only had a 12.3% swing strike rate, which isn't that great. And he was walking a decent amount of guys, which again, AAA could be just a AAA thing. But most of his time last year was at AA, 12.7% walk rate at AA. So like he has some things in here, and he's young enough that I think he still has some things to work out. I don't know if he spends the whole year in the majors next year, but I just think that he's still working through some things where like Kumar Rocker and Quinn Matthews are a little bit older. I think they just might be more polished off, which is going to lead to a smoother transition. I could be completely wrong on that, but that's kind of what the fScores are telling me when I type the data into the algorithm.
I think what Raymond really was trying to tell you is that he didn't want to come on the podcast because he put Jobe below Kumar Rocker and Quinn Matthews. I think he was saying that you're being a homer.
Probably. Especially because I have both of them in FAI. So.
Exactly.
The next tier here, interesting tier of some more young guy. This is like a young old mix. This last tier that we're going to talk about here, we got Bubba Chandler number 94, Hayden Birdsong number 95. Tomo, I don't know how my Japanese is not like my Spanish. Tomoyuki Sugano is number 96. Andrew Painter, number 97. Clayton Kershaw, 98. Braxton Garrett, 99. Robbie Ray, number 10. Or 100, sorry. 101, Yuri Perez. 102, Ryan Nelson. 103, Nick Lodolo. 104, Ben Brown. 105, Jamison Tyone. 106, Mitch Keller. 107, Sean Manaea. 108, David Peterson. 109, Shane Bieber. 110, Matthew Boyd. 111, Jose Barrios. 112, Walker Buehler. And 113, Michael Wacha. Anything in this tier stand out to you?
Yeah. Man, I guess Andrew Painter's fine because if you have the other young guys there, but Walker Buehler feels very low. I know he had a good little postseason run. I know the move to Boston's not the best for him, but I feel like he's one of those guys you talked about that, they came off injury and they're not terribly far removed from it. I can see a big boost from Walker Buehler this year, especially if people are down on him because of his regular season and they're not looking at what he did in the postseason to help out. So I feel like he would be a good target to get as like your last pitcher to fill out a rotation kind of guy that could have some good upside. Same with Nick Lodolo. I've always been a big Nick Lodolo lover, and his thing is getting hurt. And then he kind of fell off last year too, and so people soured on him. So those are two guys I feel like, at least in this range, that could get some good value, and that would be like my fifth, sixth starter that I think could have good upside if everything works out.
Yeah, I agree on Lodolo's upside. The main thing with him is stopping giving up homers, right? Like, he's the opposite of Brett Lauder, like we talked about. Like, he's all stuff, and he's going to strike a ton of dudes out. And I love him. I love watching him pitch because his stuff is crazy. But he does make mistakes quite often that lead to home runs in a ballpark that is going to give up the most home runs in all of baseball. So that makes it a little rough for Nick Lodolo. If he can get over that home run issue, kind of like how Taj Bradley was getting better at giving up home runs at the end of last year, then I could see some sort of similar performance or, like uptick that we saw from Taj last year, because Taj was pretty good. And then for Walker Buehler, this is the main thing that throws me off with Walker Buehler. If it was just last year, then I would agree with you that is just probably like, okay, yeah, he was really good in the playoffs, just one bad year. But 2022, before he got hurt, he also was not looking too good. Like, if you just look at the regular metrics, you look at it, 15K minus walk, okay, that's fine. Like 129 whip, that's not too bad. 380 ERA, whatever. It's not that bad. But under the hood, his stuff plus on his fastball in 2021 was 115 when he was amazing. In 2022, it went down to 80. And his stuff plus in general went from 117 to 96. Now, you could say that maybe he was hurt before and just like nobody knew, and that's all injury related too. But that's concerning that like his stuff plus and his fastball stuff plus had dropped so much even prior to the injury. So I don't know if this is a thing where it's just like, is he just spoiled goods now? Maybe this injury has like ruined him forever. Or is this like a buying opportunity? And maybe it's both, you know what I mean? Like, maybe he's not,
Sure.
maybe he rebounds and he's never as good as he was like back in 2021, 2019, 2020, 2021. So maybe he rebounds somewhat and is never as good, but he's still like a decent pitcher. So maybe it's somewhere in between there. But like, this is another one of these instances where I did not want to look at the name. I look at the name Walker Buehler and I'm right there with you. It's like, I want to move him up just based on his name value and what he's done in the past. But like, the numbers are telling me no, like that he's just not good anymore. You know what I mean? Or that he hasn't shown enough for me to rank him higher. It's not like this tier's bad. There's really good pitchers in this tier. Like Andrew Painter is amazing, but they already said that he's not going to pitch till June, probably June or July. Clayton Kershaw is still really good on a Kershaw is still good on a per inning basis. Where is he? Bieber's in this tier. Bieber's going to be awesome when he comes back, which is going to be the end of the year. Yuri Perez, you mentioned, like, it's going to be fire when he comes back, but he's not going to be pitched till June, July. So like, there's really good pitchers in this tier, but there's like, okay, they're not going to pitch as many innings, so that's going to have to hurt them in the grand scheme of things. If you're in an IL league where you can hold people, maybe you bring them up a little bit higher than what these rankings show. But if you're in a league like NFBC where you have to hold on to someone for 2 months. It's so hard to roster a guy like that where you only have a 7-man bench. There's no IL and you're just like stuck rostering that. Like, I don't want those types of guys in that type of league. So some of these guys where you draft them might be league dependent, but I think that this is a nice median in where you would take these guys, and you just move them up or down based on your type of league and the depth of your league.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else in this tier that you want to call out, or any other names that you want to talk about before we close off the pod?
What do you think the improvements on Sean Manaea towards the end of the year? I think he's the guy that can maybe, jump up if what he showed at the very end of the year, kind of stick.
Yeah, I agree. The interesting thing, and I heard this somewhere else, so I don't want to take the thought process on this, because it was someone else who put this in my mind. It might have been in Rates and Barrels. I can't remember what podcast I heard it on, but I heard somebody say, I don't know if it was Eno or whoever, but somebody said Sean Manaea looked amazing in the second half. He looked way better, but this is the thing: is most of those teams he saw, they've only seen the new, quote unquote, new Sean Manaea one time. So what's going to happen when they see him a second time, a third time? People have video on him now when they didn't have video on him before. So that might change, how positive some of those changes really are. It might neutral out a little bit. Like, maybe, I mean, there might be improvements still, but maybe those improvements aren't as vast as they looked to be based on, like, nobody had video on that. Nobody's seen him the second, third time. So just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
All right, so we got through 113 pitchers in this podcast. Scrolling real fast, you can see that I ranked 267 pitchers overall, and the fScores took forever, like 100+ hours of work doing this. So if you can, please subscribe to the podcast. Please rate and review the podcast, and also the YouTube channel. If you watch on YouTube, give me a nice little YouTube rating to boost my YouTube thing, and subscribe to the YouTube channel, because I don't have a lot of followers on the YouTube since I just started doing YouTube stuff. And check that out. You can also find some of my scouting videos too on YouTube. So if you want to watch, like, some of the guys that I talked about on Prospect One, I just post like raw video of my scouting that I do. So you can just see like 10 minutes of like Quinn Matthews pitching against Thomas White or whatever. Like, I have like a bunch of different stuff. I've got like Walker Jenkins. So I like some raw prospect video that I saw from my scouting stuff that I did last year. And I'll do the same thing this year. And then I'll also be catching a lot of spring training stuff. So if you want to follow for the spring training stuff, check that out, and follow me on the Twitter at Fantasy Aceball. Follow Jake on Twitter at Jake Baseball 17, and on also the Cutoff Man Pod. When are you getting going on the Cutoff Man Pod again to start in the offseason here, Jake?
Phenomenal question, Tim. Probably we're going to look up to start up about February, probably get about a month until month and a half before the season starts. Kind of good doing what we did and going through and try to be more consistent than we were last year.
That's what it's all about. Get that consistency in and get those reps in.
Exactly.
All right. So that's a podcast, and we'll see you next time. I really appreciate you coming on, Jake. It's always fun hanging out with you.
Definitely. Same here.
All right. Peace out, everybody.